members, but also other both county staff and county residents and employees as a part of this conversation. So thanks so much for joining us. And just to give you some context, part of what we do here at Rise Prince George's is really gather folks from across Prince George's in partnership and allyship with folks across the region to help work on issues of creative placemaking, sustainable transportation, and affordable housing in Prince George's County. And the focus on sustainable transportation solutions, and especially improving the quality, the amenities, and the frequency and reliability of our bus service is something that directly came out of this group's work back when it first got started in 2019. So I'm really thrilled to have such a wide crowd of almost 30 people, and hopefully growing to help make a conversation about how we can both comprehensively understand where buses are and what we can do together to help improve and better connect service in and across Prince George's County. Just so everybody understands, we are a coalition that is both an educational working group about these issues, as well as an advocacy coalition. This is one of our educational focused events. And so we really want people to dig in and learn from all the incredible diverse leaders, both the people that are presenting, as well as some of the other people that are on the call. Big shout out to you, Vic Weisberg. It's been great to work with you for a long time in and out of county government over the years. But I want to start by introducing one of Vic's colleagues, a gentleman by the name of Anthony Foster, who really does a lot of really amazing work with the bus and also coordinating with Metro to make sure the bus service happens in and around Prince George's County. He's the Chief of Transit Planning in the Department of Public Works and Transportation, as you can see by the little name tag that he has there. Very proud to have you with us, Anthony. I'm sorry that I wasn't there for Gwen Clerkley's retirement a few weeks ago, but she's a very old friend of mine from my work on county staff. Thanks everybody for being with us. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Anthony, who's going to make a presentation. We have a few other really talented speakers about bus service from the region who are also going to make presentations. And then we're going to open up the floor for questions and discussion about how we make this work better. Thanks everybody. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Bernard, for the introduction. And first, I'd like to thank Cheryl for organizing this event. It's been a long time coming. We talked prior to the pandemic about getting together, and lo and behold, virtual meetings are the name of the game now. So I'm happy to be here this evening and to share some of the good news that we have regarding our services. Just want to point out that the invitation that had our bus picture on it, that bus has been retired. And so we no longer have those on the street. So we are on our way to getting better buses on the streets of Prince George's County.
I want to use a modern bus, but I need rights to use it. So I'll talk to you afterwards about this.
No problem at all. We'll be happy to share. All right, I'm sharing my presentation now. All right, can everyone see my screen? All right, so this is one of our new buses. So it's an ENC bus that we purchased last year, and it's on the street as we speak now. But I just want to welcome everyone. Once again, my name is Anthony Foster, Chief of Transit Planning here at the county. I've been here just over 5.5 years now. And since that time, a lot of things have happened with the county. A lot of small investments are starting to kind of pay off now. And I'll be happy to kind of walk you through what we've done over the past year. As many people know, DPW&T oversees the bus through a fixed route contractor, RATP Dev. Our bus system, it's smaller than Ride-On, it's smaller than Metro Bus, but prior to COVID, we attracted roughly 2.1 million riders per fiscal year. As you know, the pandemic has kind of upended a lot of our worlds, and transit is no exception to that. So we were definitely provided with a unique set of challenges that we never experienced before. We had to reduce service as a result of the pandemic, and we reduced service down to 16 lines out of the 28 that we operated prior to COVID. Right now, we have started to slowly ramp up service. So we have about 20 lines back in service now. We hope to activate additional lines as fall approaches. We are definitely committed to both serving our communities and bringing forth new innovations during these unprecedented times. And that will be the theme that you'll hear throughout the presentation. Just a quick snapshot of the trends. As you can see, it's like a bell curve that's kind of skewed to the right. We had peaked ridership last year around this time, and then it slowly trailed off. Notably, the North County routes had attracted more ridership compared to the South County routes over this period of time, but things are starting to even out now as we get closer to the summertime. In 2020, we did make some service enhancements that may not attract a lot of attention. So I just want to kind of quickly go through it. Last year, we increased the frequencies on the Route 18, the 24, and the 32 all day. We had hourly headway service and we bumped it up to 30 minutes. We also added additional routes as the courthouse became slowly open to the public in Upper Marlboro, and we activated the Route 20 and 21 at the same level of the frequency. And then coinciding with WMATA, we activated additional lines at 30 minutes all day, including the Route 30, 33, and 35. The 30 goes to Branch Avenue, the 33 serves Neola Road, Southern Avenue, Camp Springs, and the 35 serves Southern Avenue in Camp Springs as well. It is important to note that we did not lay off any bus operators during this time. We kept all of them employed thanks to the COVID funding received by the federal government. Some of the accomplishments I wanted to kind of quickly go through. We transitioned to a new third-party contractor this time last year. Our new contractor is RATP Dev. They are the same contractor for the DC Circulator. We are very happy to have them on board, and they provide a new set of eyes on our system. At the same time, we retired all of our 2008 and most of the 2009 model year buses. And we're happy to have new fleet on our streets, and our passengers have received them positively. On some of the new buses, people may not know that we have display screens at the front, and we also have USB charging ports for cell phones. We did start a major overhaul of our onboard equipment so that we'll be providing new reliable real-time information for our passengers starting next month. I'll describe a little bit more about that, but it is called PTC Connect. We ordered 4 new battery electric buses with the FTA's assistance through the FI-19 Low-No grant. We're happy to be a recipient of that, and those buses will be hitting the street sometime in the fall. And lastly, we did receive new call-a-bus passenger vehicles as well during 2020. PGC Link. It is an on-demand service that's operating in Fort Washington, Maryland now. It is similar to Montgomery County's Flex service. They operate 2 zones within that county. Here in Prince George's County, we operate between National Harbor and neighborhoods south of 210. We've recently expanded to Accokeek, down to Berry Road. If those are familiar with South County, we go to the Manokeek Shopping Center that's near 210 and 228. We started just after Election Day, November the 9th. We've gotten some slow traction, admittedly, on the system, but the word is spreading about our service, and hopefully this forum will expose people to what we offer. It's just $2 per trip all day if you're within that zone, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 3:30. Just this quick overview of kind of recent initiatives. We reduced the adult fare to $1. It was $1.25 last year. Kids can ride free all day, those that are 18 and younger. We upgraded shelters at the Oxon Hill Park and Ride lot and at the courthouse. So at these particular locations, you can get free Wi-Fi. You have enhanced lighting. You have display panels that show information about, we'll be showing information about when the bus is coming and other related information about the weather and maybe some news and other PSA ads. We modified a route that we had in service, and we basically did some innovative things for this recent service change. We created a new route number, 19, which is in West Hyattsville. So we combined the Route 12, that was in Chillum with the Route 13 that operated in downtown Hyattsville. So those are kind of one seamless bus line now. We did make a slight tweak on the east side to go towards North Brentwood. So it provides a new coverage area for that community. So it links them with the activity center at the Mall of Prince George's, the Green Line station there, and also at West Hyattsville, and also in shops and points of interest in between. I'm happy to announce that we are going to have free Wi-Fi on all of our vehicles starting later this month. We are getting ready to promote that heavily in the next couple of weeks. So any passenger that boards our bus can look for PGC Connect on their Wi-Fi on their phone and log on to check email, to check the news or what have you during their trip. Within the past month, we received word that the county was a successful recipient of another grant award through the Low-No program in an amount of $5.1 million to purchase another set of battery electric buses and also charging equipment. So we're excited about that. So we're definitely looking forward to getting those vehicles ordered and on the street. It takes a little while for those things to come through, but we're laying the groundwork for that to happen. And we have an upcoming fleet upgrade, as I mentioned, to our AVL system. That will be publicly released next month. We do have the electric buses, as I mentioned before, that are going to be online as well. And we are looking at fall service changes that will be implemented around October of this year. The transit vision plan, a lot of people have been asking about that, and I included the slide to kind of just give a sense of kind of where we're at with implementing the plan. So the items that are highlighted in yellow include some of the things we actually tackled and accomplished. So we implemented Saturday service on the major lines in the system. We implemented first and last mile service in the Fort Washington Accokeek area through PGC Link. We also increased service frequencies on 2 lines, the 18 and the 30. And then we modified our services, as I alluded before, on the Route 19. So we still have a little ways to go, but I just want to kind of point out that we've been chipping away at this plan, even though the pandemic has kind of slowed things down for us. PGC Connect is the new app that will be available soon through Google and through the Apple App Store. We're excited to have this available for our public. So hopefully within the next 3 or 4 weeks, you'll hear more about this, but I wanted to kind of give people a preview of what we've put out there so far on the social media. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you for your attention. And I guess we could wait till the very end to have questions or comments. I'll turn it over to Bernard or Cheryl.
Thank you, Anthony. Really appreciate that for giving us that background on kind of where we are, and also a little snapshot of where service improvements have been. I think that last slide, if you can hang on to it, might be a really good place for us to tab back to once we get back to the questions.
Sure.
Thank you so much again. So in a similar sense, Anthony was talking about the bus and how Prince George's County's local bus service expands and helps extend service towards especially the last 1 to 2 miles of service that most people in transit in our county get. But our next speaker is really going to speak to how all of that service really connects with the rest of the region. So Jim Hamre is Metro's chief of service and station planning, and is a veritable encyclopedia of knowledge about bus service and bus operations, both the past, present, and future in our region. He can also, in addition to many other things, really help us give a better sense for what are some regional bus routes that serve Prince George's County versus non-regional lines, and kind of how some of those distinctions help create connections for people that are getting around our county. Thanks so much for joining us, Jim. The floor is yours.
Sure, thank you, Bernard. I'll go ahead and share my screen and the presentation put together here. So good evening. Thank you for inviting WMATA to participate in this discussion this evening. Thank you, Cheryl, and welcome to all my colleagues and riders and interested members of the community. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've gone through over the last 16 months, because you kind of have to know where you've come from to know where you're going and how to get there. So when the pandemic hit 16 months ago, Metro created sort of a 5-phase approach to addressing the transit requirements of the region. Back in the spring of 2020, when the stay-at-home orders were being enacted and ridership, travel, economic activity around the region really evaporated, we responded with, as Anthony was saying, we had to cut back on services, invent service on the fly. And as a result, when you look at the difference between ridership on March 13th and ridership on March 17th, it was pretty dramatic how quickly the region changed. Beginning in June and working through August of last year, we were able to move into what we called stabilization. That's where we were able to operate services. The customers knew what was coming. The workforce matched the service that we were operating, and we were in, if not a strong position, we were at least maintaining connectivity around the region for essential travel, for transit-dependent riders, and doing so while protecting public health. Managed reentry really began with services that we implemented this last March, where we started expanding the coverage, expanding the span or the time each day that we were operating, and provided additional capacity for riders. Where we find ourselves today is in recovery. And I'll be talking in this presentation about what we're going to do this fall to really help lead the return to vibrant economic activity around the region. And then resilience is the part that follows. Probably for us will be fiscal 23, which would be the end of June, beginning of July of next year. And that's where we will begin really coming to grips with the future of transit. Sort of give a context of what a big change occurred around the region. You can see here, Metrobus was carrying about 430,000 riders a day back in early March. And then all of a sudden the cliff happened and we were down to less than 100,000. In fact, we got as low as, I think, 45,000 on a given day, but you can see that we started that recovery trend. We had a pretty good rate of growth, and we're bouncing up against the 200,000 rider a day limit when winter happened and fares were reinstituted. And of course, January in the Washington region was sort of unprecedented in its own right. So ridership was a little bit uneven, but since the end of winter, the ridership has been on a steady climb upwards. But what's different about it is in the past, the Washington region was particularly defined by the commute of the federal workforce and the folks going downtown. And as a result, we had these huge peaks, both on Metrobus and Metrorail during the rush periods, but then ridership sort of evaporated in the middle of the day and dropped off in the evenings. And as you can see with the solid line here, the ridership still has some peaking trends, but there's a whole lot more as a proportion of ridership occurring middays and evenings for people traveling in the non-traditional commute patterns. And that's a theme that you'll see. This table here, or set of tables, really indicates just what a dramatic change travel in the Washington region has faced in the last 16 months. Our traffic volume has dropped around the region, although in the outer suburbs, traffic may have returned to normal. It's like there's a donut. There's a lot less of it in the downtown area, inside the Beltway. Restaurants have been growing relatively quickly in the springtime, but you can see how much of that industry dropped off. The Washington region is very much driven by the hospitality industry. You can see office occupancy is down significantly, and the daily downtown population was a quarter of what it was previously. So trying to predict what to do with this sort of unprecedented disruption of normal life has been really challenging. So we asked ourselves a series of questions as we were developing the next round of service implementations, and that is what combination of services and fares best supports the return to economic activity and recovery in the region, really encourages a faster recovery of our ridership, because more than a third of our budget comes from fares. So for us to be able to sustain the system, we need fare box revenue. How do we promote the system regionally, integrate with local operators, and really have a more connected, easier to use and integrated system? How do we particularly focus on supporting low-income essential workers, the folks who have chosen transit lifestyles and rely on us as their means of travel? And then lastly, how do we induce travel, particularly as we look in the next few years? The return to work patterns will be different than they have been, but with all those folks at home, they're making different kinds of trips, more chained trips where they go to multiple things, where they're doing recreation or shopping or school-based travel. And how do we really focus on that? And so the opportunity that we highlighted on was really focusing on those non-peak hours of the day and trying to create a scenario where transit is attractive, convenient, quick, and really focus on trying to grow that portion of the market. And one way to do that is to provide for consistent service across the day. In the past, we would schedule every trip to a certain number of riders. And so in certain portions of the day, you would have relatively good frequency of service, but toward the middle of the day, that would widen out to 30 minutes or in some places 60-minute frequencies. Then we'd go through the same pattern in the peak afternoon, and in the evening we'd drop off, and that's been a particular challenge in the county where service ends relatively early compared to in the district or some of the other inner suburbs. So what we proposed to the board last June, and they ultimately approved, was developing a frequent service concept where we would run 12-minute frequency on some lines, 20-minute frequency on others, all day, every day. That's Monday through Friday, that's Saturday and Sunday, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. Over 60% of our riders would benefit from these increases. Obviously, it's intended to support the economic activity, the travel of transit dependents, and also to help with serving populations throughout the region, but particularly oriented toward low-income, minority, and supporting that. So we also matched that up with some fare changes. One is to increase the discount for transferring between bus and rail, rail and bus. In the past, that's been 50 cents each way. So for a $2 fare, you still had to pay $1.50 if you changed modes. That really discouraged a lot of people from using the railroad to make a longer distance trips because it really cost more money. So one of the, and I think most significant things we've done is to match that. So now the transfer into the rail will be the same as the entry fee. And if you've ridden a rail trip, you can transfer for free onto Metrobus to complete your trip. That really begins to integrate the two modes. And then we've also tried to lower the price on a number of our pass products, not only to provide encouragement to the customer to use those pass products, but also pass products tend to stabilize our income. And that's really going to be crucial as we get into that period of resilience and we need to continue to pay for services. We actually began the ramp up of services last June with extension to 2 a.m. on a number of lines across the region, and that's 7 days a week. We added additional capacity during peak periods, during middays, and on weekends especially, and further expanded the footprint to get back into all of the markets, or nearly all of the markets that we've been serving before the pandemic. Additionally, just this last Sunday, the railroad began operating until midnight, 7 days a week, and come September, that will be increased to include 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights, again, to support the entertainment and hospitality economy of the region. And as right now, our fall service plan is intended to go into effect on September 5, with September 7 being the terrible Tuesday, return to school and all of that. That'll be our first weekday with all of these supplements. And then looking forward into next year, the new Silver Line extension out to Loudoun County will go into effect. And that'll be a significant expansion of transit access around the region. One of the key things we've been doing as we've developed all of these investments is make sure that we're complying with Title VI, which is federal guidelines and regulations regarding making sure that we have no disparate impacts on minority populations or low income. We did a preliminary scan on all of this and we found no disparate impact. In fact, there's a strong tendency toward investment on the eastern side of the region. And this process doesn't allow for bonus points, but we think we're gaining some significant bonus points as we go through with this. And there will be a lot of public outreach and surveys and opportunities for folks to weigh in with their opinion. But we're going to get the services started and then let people react to what actually is happening, not necessarily have to project what us planners are describing and respond to that. This is really a significant opportunity that the federal money that was provided for recovery, Anthony referenced it earlier. We've received $800 million through 3 different packages. And so that allowed us to sustain our workforce, sustain our service, and now play a little bit with house money and just try some really big game-changing experiments with service. And this map here shows how one of the things we looked at was trying to make sure that we were aligning these frequent services with where high density exists around the region. Additionally, we made sure that we were providing services in the equity emphasis areas. And there's a significant increase in the number of riders who are able to access high frequency transit service, whether it be Metro Rail or Metro Bus. Upwards of over 60% have access to these this new network, in addition to all the regular services that we continue to run. We looked at a number of elements as we were making these recommendations. ranging from their contribution to the overall ridership in the network, their share of retained riders through the COVID period. That really highlights the resilient, transit-dependent essential worker and those that really rely on it. And then we also did the same exercise for the 20-minute network and looked at other lines that for potential, and they just didn't quite make the threshold, but we will continue to provide investments. It's not only about service. Those of you that are in the north part of the county have been experiencing the Summer Platform Improvement Project. That is got 5 stations along the Green Line, and we've been running bus shuttles carrying over 6,000 riders a day to support that. But when those stations come back, they will be new, refreshed, safer with new amenities. And we're also making investments in partnership with the county. We just finished installing something like 30 of these solar powered e-paper real-time passenger information displays. The images in this slide are at Oxon Hill Park and Ride, but we're distributing them all across the region. And we've got a new way to pay for transit using smart trip apps on both iPhone and Android, and then real-time crowding. And you can see here, this is a slide from the rail PIDs indicating that first train is pretty crowded, but the train right after it has plenty of room. So hopefully customers will be able to make decisions about whether they get on the train with all of the other customers or whether they wait and find something that's less crowded. And then this fall, we'll be doing a big Welcome Rider Back campaign, and they'll be covering a lot of different media and target audiences to, again, really stimulate folks to use this new network. That takes care of about a third, 40% of our system, but there's a lot of other things going on. Additional service, additional frequency on the corridors that weren't part of the frequent network. And you can see throughout Maryland, particularly Prince George's and the Greenbelt area, Hyattsville, there's a lot of investment in improving the buses and restoring them to pre-COVID levels. But there is a cost, and that is that by investing a lot of resources in the high frequent corridors, there are some services that will not be restored, at least for the remainder of this fiscal year. And that includes the rush hour supplement to Oxon Hill, the rush period supplement that eventually will be replaced by the Purple Line anyway, the J4, the bus that goes over to BWI Airport. There's plenty of other ways to get there, and some rush hour supplements along US 1 in the north part of the county. So just in summary, I would leave you with this plan that's improving access to destinations and increasing service and frequency and convenience, making it possible for people to travel where, when, and how they want, restoring the service and providing this walk-up concept where you don't really need to know the schedule on any of these lines. You just show up and there'll be a bus really soon. Focused improvements. It's really crucial that we work and support the communities, and we coordinate the capital investments. And so that's the end of my presentation, and I will be happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you so much, Jim. No, I appreciate that. We have like tons of questions, and I just want everybody to know, if you have questions, please drop them into the chat. And as our next presenter wraps up, I'd also encourage people, if you want to get on camera and like queue up and say something, also raise your hand, because we'll get to questions right as soon as our next presenter wraps up. And that's in part because Jim gave us great background on how Metro serves the region and serves Prince George's, but John Hillegas is going to kind of help put all of our previous presenters into a little bit of context. by talking about some transit benchmarking that he does, how Prince George's bus service compares with the rest of the region, as well as some work he's done on something called the Bus Transformation Report Card. So we're going to give John the floor to close us out. He's from the Greater Washington Partnership, does lots of great amazing work around transit and transportation mobility stuff. So thank you so much for joining us, John. And once John is done, we'll open up the floor for questions for everybody. So keep putting stuff in the chat and start raising your hand, and we'll kick it around to everybody once he wraps. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bernard. And can everyone see my screen? Hopefully I'm not blocking any view here. Great. Well, my name is John Hilligus, and I'm the manager for regional mobility and infrastructure at the Greater Washington Partnership. And it's a huge honor to be here presenting with Anthony and Jim. And I just want to thank you both for your public service, and thank you, Cheryl and Bernard, for inviting me here to talk. So it was really great hearing from Anthony about a lot of the improvements they're working on at the bus in Prince George's, and especially real-time data service improvements. And it was great hearing about from Jim, WMATA's perspective on how they're recovering from the COVID impacts, and especially the focus on all-day frequent service. But for those of you who are not familiar, the Greater Washington Partnership is a civic alliance of CEOs and entrepreneurs from the Capital Region. So that spans from Baltimore down to Richmond, including, of course, Prince George's County. And collectively, our board members employ more than 230,000 people throughout the Capital Region. And our mission is to make the Capital Region the best place to live, work, and build a business. And to do that, we focus on three main subject matters: transportation, talent, and inclusive growth. So I'm part of the transportation team here at the partnership. One of our first initiatives as an organization was to develop what we call the Blueprint for Regional Mobility, which is a strategy to create a seamless transportation network across the region. And one of the 7 pillars of that strategy is to create a high-performing public transit network. So since 2018, we've been working to implement the recommendations of the Blueprint, and that's included some of the work such as our Rethinking the Bus brief, our Capital Region Rail Vision, which focuses on how we can improve commuter rail around the region, and our Building the Transit-Oriented Region report on how to unlock transit-oriented development potential in Prince George's and Anne Arundel counties. And you can find all of these reports on our website, and I'd encourage you to go check them out. But at the partnership, we believe the business community has a really important role to play in supporting high quality public transit, because we know our businesses rely on transit for their workforce, for their customer base, and that quality transit is really a necessary ingredient for a region that people want to live, work, and play and build a business in. And that's why we're one of the founding members of the Metro Now Coalition. And the Metro Now Coalition came together in 2018 to try to secure an additional $500 million in annual dedicated capital funding from Maryland, DC, and Virginia, so that the Metro rail system could get back to good and overcome its kind of decades of deferred maintenance. So we were successful with that in 2018. And so in 2019, the coalition really started to look at how we can rethink and reprioritize the bus around the region. And one of the key takeaways for me from 2020 and the coronavirus pandemic was that it really just confirmed how essential bus service is. Workers around the region relied on bus service to actually survive the pandemic and to continue to feed their families. And our bus and our rail operators put themselves and their health and safety on the line every day to provide that service. But for too long as a region, we have not prioritized the bus. And we haven't looked at how the bus can actually be a tool to expand access to opportunity, improve transportation outcomes around the region, and narrow our growing income and race-based inequities in our region. So I want to talk for a little bit about Prince George's buses in particular, and just looking at some data. Obviously, Prince George's is served by both the bus and Metrobus, which are the two main providers for the county. And so these next two slides just compare some of the transit providers in the area. And so from a ridership perspective, you can see that Prince George's is not the best in terms of having the most riders, but it's also not the worst. So it outperforms neighboring Anne Arundel County. More trips are taken per resident. And however, it significantly underperforms in terms of ridership compared to neighboring Montgomery County. partly because it probably has a less robust service, as you can see by the vehicles in operation on a daily basis. In terms of operating expenses per rider, again, it's not the best or the worst in the region of its peer jurisdictions or transit agencies. But I think what this table really helps demonstrate for me is that, as a general rule, the more you spend on transit, the more people are going to ride transit, the lower the operating cost per rider, and the more useful the system is. So how can Prince George's get better bus service? Well, I think the good news here is that there's not a secret recipe. There are well-known investments and policies that we can make as a region to improve bus service, to improve the experience for existing bus users, and to attract new bus ridership. So you can see kind of on the screen the top line recommendations from the Greater Washington Partnership for how to improve the bus, the Metro Now Coalition, and the Washington Area Bus Transformation Project, which is actually led by WMATA in conjunction with all of the region's jurisdictions and transit agencies. And actually, Prince George's Transit Vision Plan echoes many of these same recommendations, including kind of increased service hours and frequencies. So if we take these recommendations and kind of try to apply them to the Prince George's context, I think first we should really applaud the county for adding Saturday service to the bus. But as we all know, and perhaps unfortunately, the world doesn't shut down on Sundays anymore, and we think transit shouldn't either. So I think that's kind of one of the next big steps for me. And as Anthony went over, the county is actually already working on a lot of these recommendations, and so is WMATA. And I'm particularly excited to see the real-time information coming out in August, which is going to be a huge help. But this isn't just the transit nerds like me who support these recommendations. It's also supported by Prince George's community members. The highest priorities that were identified at the public meetings during the Transit Vision Plan process were more weekend service, expanded hours of service, and improved service frequency, so more frequent buses. And I think part of the reason is because if the bus is not there when you need it, the bus is a barrier rather than a door to unlock opportunities. So why haven't we prioritized the bus? In general, it comes down to money, coordination, and political will. So we need more money for operating and capital expenses. We need better coordination between the many transit agencies, especially the bus and WMATA's Metro bus for Prince George's. And we need the political will so that we can get the funding and coordination. And that's why I'm very excited that Rise Prince George's exists now, because I think you guys can really help to build the political will around bus prioritization in the county and why we need to support the bus and invest in the bus long term. So this next slide is maybe a quick little tangent, but just as I think an illustrative example of kind of a low-hanging fruit that maybe we could identify in the region. Because today it is hard to know how you can get around the region on the bus unless you have a GPS. So you can kind of look at the difference between the iconic Metro map and WMATA's bus map and Prince George's bus map. And for both, you essentially need a magnifying glass or a geography degree to read it. And that also kind of speaks to the complexity of our bus networks. Because there's these competing needs to provide coverage for a wide geography of the county, but also provide that high quality service on the priority routes. So without substantially increasing funding, it's really hard to do both those, covering the whole county and providing good, frequent service to do it well. So to kind of close out, if I had to offer some recommendations for how to create a better bus service in Prince George's County, I'd say that tomorrow, WMATA and the bus's operations and leadership teams need to go on a retreat, and they need to figure out how they're going to work together over the next few years on a regular basis in terms of figuring out, who's focusing on the high frequency priority routes, who's going to focus on coverage, how can they make sure they're achieving the goals of the Transit Vision Plan together and the WMATA Bus Transformation Project together. And how are we going to collaboratively redesign our bus networks over the years so we have a cohesive system, because people in Prince George's go to DC, they go to Anne Arundel, they go to Howard County, and bus service shouldn't stop at our borders, but it should be more integrated. Within 5 years, the county should really figure out how they're going to increase funding for bus priority investments, just like the region needs to figure out how we're going to increase funding for bus priority investments for WMATA and around the region. So when I say bus priority investments, I'm talking about things like bus lanes that can significantly increase the reliability and the speed of buses. And we need to figure out how we're going to fund more service, because again, if the bus is not frequent, it's a barrier. So these new bus priority investments, like bus lanes, are probably going to be best if we can really build off a regional bus network redesign, because many of our bus systems, many of our bus routes haven't really been updated in years, if not decades, and our region has changed in that amount of time. So finally, long term, I think the county really needs to encourage denser land uses, especially near metro stations and along these priority transit corridors. Because fixed route transit service, so a bus line, a light rail, it cannot pay for itself in low density suburbs. So at this, and then the second component of that is, while it's encouraging denser land use, it really needs to make sure it's investing in affordability and preserving existing residents along these corridors so that they can benefit from those investments in high quality transit and high quality bus service. And we're very glad to see County Executive Alsobrooks working on doing both those things with her economic development platform, focusing on the blue line, the blue metro line. So last but not least, I just want to mention that the Metro Now Coalition is working on a report that shows progress around the region in terms of all of the transit agencies, in terms of all of the jurisdictions against the bus transformation project's 4 recommendations and 26 initiatives. That original report came out in 2019. Of course, we had the COVID pandemic in between now and then, so we might not have made as much progress as we want, but we want to kind of keep that report alive, keep those recommendations moving forward. So please keep your eye out for that report, which we will hopefully be releasing sometime in September. So thank you, and thank you for having me, and I look forward to the questions and discussion.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you joining us tonight and offering your thoughts and perspectives to close us out. I know that was a lot of talking at people, but we definitely want to shift the conversation and have other folks join in. So if you want to say something to one of our panelists or to anyone else in the group, because we have lots of like thoughtful commentators, but people who work in county government, people who work on transportation issues outside of the county, in addition to county residents on the panel, feel free to jump in. I know Bill Orleans had a question, and I just wanted to raise something that I was hoping before we get to Bill's question, that I know people had, Priscilla and Linda had referenced in the chat, that I was hoping Jim Hamre could briefly address before we get started, or maybe some combination of Jim and Anthony if it's relevant. How is the new Capital Region Medical Center going to affect the provision of bus service in and around the Largo area, both as it relates to both like the new hospital site, kind of the hopes for Carillon to grow up as an activity center and downtown for Prince George's around it, but also the fact that, like, to what John was just talking about, and our group is very well aware of, as we've been one of the lead champions for it, is that this broader attempt to kind of build out the Blue Line corridor, I hope would require some aligned service that doesn't just focus on the Largo area, but also creates better connectivity from Morgan through Capitol Heights and Addison Road. So I wasn't sure, Jim, if you wanted to take that first. I was going
to let Anthony answer first. And
Sure, I'll answer. Right now, we have a number of bus lines coming to the Largo station. We talked about realigning maybe 1 or 2 lines that go in front of the hospital. So we'll probably, if we do that, it will be probably towards the fall. If we just make a slight tweak, so it just provides more front door service to the hospital from the metro station. There's been some brainstorming of how to connect the Largo area parts of Bowie. So that could be accomplished through maybe some Prince George's County link service, where it kind of serves some of those lower density neighborhoods to complement Metro bus service potentially. So they could catch the Metro bus to a certain point and then maybe hop on a link, or they could just go from the Largo Metro to a link service if there's no Metro bus service present. So there's those kind of internal brainstorming things that are coming up now that the hospital's online. So stay tuned. So no idea is a bad idea. So we welcome.
Well, so this will be the friendly reminder that I would offer that's come out of some of our group's early discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Is to think about that bus connection in the opposite. Since we're investing in that new health campus in kind of like the Capitol Heights, Hampton Park area, and there are a lot of other focuses longer term on wanting to like connect that corridor. Like I was even thinking like less so outside the Beltway and more like Largo in. If we're creating this allied health district, how do people get in and around that allied health district?
And
And
it wasn't ideally coordinated with the deployment. We made some adjustments. There are changes in what I described earlier to make sure that we've got regular, reliable service connecting there. But I would point out also that there is a Metro Rail station right around the corner from the building. And that's going to be a key part. We think that the eliminating the transfer penalty between bus and rail is going to allow people to really take advantage of the transfer at Capitol Heights at Addison Road and use the Blue Line to make that final connection. And that's the really exciting part of the unification of the transit network that this fall's program will show.
No, that makes total sense. And thank you. Bill, if you want to jump in, feel free to ask your question. Mr. Orleans, you're on the mic.
I mute myself here. Mr. Holloway, it's unclear to me what this new entity is called, RISE or RIDE Prince George's. Is this to replace the old the Bus Riders Advisory Committee that has been dormant and then returned at some point? Is this a business group?
No, it's fine. RISE Prince George's is a new kind of outside extension of the Coalition for Smarter Growth. That's why I'm working with Cheryl on this. And it's been my attempt to kind of organize many of the people that I've worked with formally and informally in and outside of county government to push on these issues. It's not to supplant any of the existing formal advisory committees, although I certainly do hope some of our members become active and participating members of those committees. And at that point, I'll stop. And Anthony, if anybody else wants to jump in with more details on where some of the status of that public engagement and outreach exists right now, that's fine. I'm also happy to bring back Courtney Glass or whomever else you'd like from your colleagues in the department to talk about that at a later date too. We're just hoping to do that at some point down the road.
Well, if this is going to be a function of the coalition, certainly Cheryl will recall that in the past, there has been various attempts to organize riders outside of the county department's official riders group. But that's been dormant for even longer, I think, than the department's riders advisory group. If this is going to be a function of the coalition, are meetings to be held behind closed doors? Or are you going to be having public meetings? How can riders?
So in terms of, no. So in terms of our work, and I did want Anthony and the folks from like the county's official group to kind of talk about their work separately. But for our work, we're going to alternate between having public events like this that are focused on educating people about issues and working meetings, which is what our last meeting was back towards the end of June. So like about every other meeting, we'll have kind of organizing focus meetings about where our Butter Buses campaign is focused in terms of the next set of topics that we want to push all these lovely people to do better on. But for right now, kind of the focus of what we have here today is a chance to engage with some really great experts and ask them questions about what's going on and inform some of our group work later, Bill. Does that make sense?
Sure, and I'll say that it was a pleasure to hear Anthony and Jim Hamry as well. Not so much of a pleasure as I would have preferred it to be, but I'm glad they're still alive. I'm glad that both of you are still alive.
It's nice to hear from you as well,
Yes.
Mr. Orleans. I'm glad you're still active.
And I do think there was a really great question there about where is the status of the formal public engagement opportunities for both like the county's Rider Advisory Council and what happens regionally with Ramada. Thanks, guys.
Sure. Mr. Orleans, thank you. It's always good to hear from you and good question. I will be transparent. We haven't held a Rider Advisory Committee meeting in quite a while, partly due to COVID. However, I'll put a plug out. I can work with you, Cheryl and Bernard. If there's a way to get people who are interested to contact me or send me an email to say, I would like to participate in a bi-monthly or quarterly session where we can talk about specific the bus issues. And then we can have a conversation with our contractor. So if there's issues about on-time performance or bus operator behavior, et cetera, we'll be happy to have those discussions. But when we held these the last time, no one showed up. So I'm trying to figure out a way to either get the word out better or to get people to come to me, if they're interested in doing that. But by no means, we are not foregoing that, but we're just kind of just readjusting our strategy in terms of getting people.
And Metro continues to have a Riders Advisory Committee. We have a Accessibility Advisory Committee. And because of the change in the way that people engage, we've really ramped up our customer research, our public outreach. We have a public participation plan policy that puts people in the field and creates lots of opportunities for people formally and informally to express their opinion. We monitor Twitter, we receive emails, we have a complaint line. There's a lot of ways that people can engage us. And the input is very helpful. We respond as quickly as we can. And in some instances, with Twitter, we've been responding to people's issues, within minutes, actually, in some instances. Where there's an issue with an operator or something's not working right, it really has been very helpful to us.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Anthony. I appreciate both of those perspectives on how people can go in and add their feedback. And something that Cheryl and I have been really hungry to do is get more feedback from all of you. So something that will happen as a part of our follow-up from this meeting is we're not only going to share people's presentations, so you can pull out and look at some of their information in more kind of brief. It may not be a survey, but it'll at least be like a quick question that you all can kind of respond to us about whether or not you'd like to provide some of that feedback that Anthony just talked about. Because one of the things that we hope folks that are in our group can do is that this can be a forum for you to get information and also engage stakeholders. So if there is folks from Public Works in the bus that you want to talk to, or folks from Metro that you want to talk to, and you think that there's something in one of our meetings that's an important idea that needs to be heard more broadly, we want to be a conduit to help connect you to the right committee or forum or work group to make sure that feedback gets heard. So wanted to make sure if folks had other questions. I know like Priscilla's been on the chat really hard. Douglas just got on camera with us. Feel free to like speak up. I don't want to be the only one talking here.
Bernard, there was the map by a member of the meeting. Yes, we will address that. It is out of date. We would working to kind of actually revamp the map and also our bus schedules with the introduction, or basically having our new contractor on board now. We have access to other resources we didn't have before. And one of those are the marketing resources. And so my personal goal is to revamp the public timetables. So they look clean, look polished, and have a different look overall. We started a little bit in that direction. If you look at the website now, there's a different look to the way the bus lines are presented. Each one has an individual page. It has a map. And eventually we hope to kind of, if it's possible, to integrate the live map on that page so that once you click on a bus line, you can see automatically where it is in the system. So we're trying to do little tweaks here and there to make it easier for people to get information. So I agree with the comments out there. We have a ways to go, but we're kind of starting down that path slowly.
So Anthony, thank you so much for sharing that and like acknowledging that. And I actually want to offer like a friendly challenge, because I know Cheryl and I will like hold up our end of the bargain. Like we're really big believers in wanting to offer a forum for both awareness and accountability. So when you all get to a point where you have new web tools and information that you'd like to roll out to riders and have people be more aware of, I'd love to have one of our future meetings be a forum to both announce that to both our group and also walk people through the tools, so that a lot of the folks that work with us who are interested in being connected to and improving that service, like I saw some of DW's comments in the chat, like want to make sure that like she sees that like that momentum is happening and people are better able to get that information self-serve. Because the reason why I complimented you all on the GPS upgrades is I've like literally been using the bus at different moments in time to get to and from the courthouse or like other really essential activities. And I've like wondered, compared to other parts of the system, like what time is it going to get here? Can I make the next thing? And so the fact that you all are making that progress is something I want to celebrate and not only like criticize.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bernard. We're going to have more information next month about the new app and website that will go with it. And I think it'll go twofold. It will inform our customers on where the bus is, but also provide accountability to our contractor on making sure that we adhere to the schedule. So I think I'm looking forward to it. You know, our old system, Next Bus, no, I'm not trying to make any digs on it, but it definitely wasn't meeting our needs. And so we're happy to have a new software platform to roll out to residents.
That sounds great. Cool. Rodney Harrell, like, are you ready to jump in?
I am, and actually want to follow up on that point because I am excited every time I hear that there's better technology. We're moving further and further from the days of trying to read a paper schedule to know when the next bus might come. But I do have a question though about that. In the use of all the technology pieces, are we thinking about those that don't speak English and that may not have access to technology? I saw a quick look at the bus digital information that was on the bus poll there. I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit, Anthony, about those two groups.
Yes, we do have a strong limited English population that uses our service in the Langley Park area. The tools or the information that we shared tonight will be translated into Spanish. We are still developing our strategy in terms of how to promote the new technology to that community. So stay tuned. But typically we do offer stuff in a bilingual format. So all of our passengers can understand what's going on.
Great. And the digital information at the bus stop, I couldn't see because it was so quick, but that's, that you don't need technology to see what's going on at the bus stop itself with the bus scheduling.
That's
all that.
part of a program that we've been working on for about 5 years with the goal of having at least 800 digital displays around the region. And in this most recent instance, we installed some that we paid for, and Anthony purchased some additional signs using our contract. So we're going to support the maintenance of that ongoing. Because you're right, it's important for people to have the information they need when and where they need it so they can make their travel decisions. And that's part of having the digital information available through the internet. And Metro Bus's internet protocol is called Bus ETA, and that provides real-time information on every vehicle in the system. There are a lot of developers that use that information for other applications, and we certainly encourage that. But it's part of a concerted effort to expand and improve the quality of the trip planning information that customers have. So before they even make the decision to travel Metrobus, the trip planner's correct, the bus location information is correct, the service frequency information is available, the destinations are discernible, and we're working in a formal program to improve all of that in the coming year.
That's wonderful. I'll just close with saying that the other things I hear about all the time from people in the communities, among different boards and the community I live in Largo, by the way, And glad to see that there's stuff being made. That was put in one of the comments that accurate information can be the difference between keeping a job and not, or getting to your loved one or not, or your caregiving issues, all these things that people have. So the more we can do to make it more reliable and that information clear to folks, the better off we are, I think.
I agree, and we are excited to have that new technology online. Believe me, we put it like yesterday, but it takes a while for things to kind of work together behind the scenes. So, but stay tuned, and we'll go from there.
Could I address
Actually,
one question that was in the chat, and that is about the buses themselves? All of our Metro buses are wheelchair accessible. They're low floor with a ramp that deploys for wheelchair access, but also kneeling buses. We have air conditioning in every vehicle, as well as audio and visual cues as to what bus it is, where it's going, where it is, and how much it costs to operate or to pay the fare. And so all of that makes a great package of accessibility for making use of Metrobus.
I have a question I wanted to ask. I have ridden both Metrobus and the bus in Prince George's, and the long gaps between buses, and then also like I go to a meeting in the evening and I can't get home, I can't get back on the bus because the service ends like around 7 o'clock or something like that. And so sort of like, how do we, I really appreciate that the bus has made it to Saturday service, but not Sunday service. And that, most of the routes still are about shutting down at about 7 o'clock. I understand we're in a pandemic, but it seems like we need a lot more money. We need a lot more something. We need a lot more people to say this is a priority to be fully implementing the transit vision plan. I would say that, what Jim Hamry presented looked like a really great route for kind of more the denser parts of Prince George's County with a 12-minute headway. Is that right? For a network that runs on a 12-minute headway. So if I live in like Capitol Heights, say that, I'll probably be in pretty good shape.
As long as your meeting's end by 9 o'clock, you'll be in great shape.
But it's sort of like, what does it take like to connect to the next level? Anthony, you have shown progress, but like, do we need a lot more money to implement the bus vision plan?
I would say it's a combination of things. So we need the funding, we need actual more vehicles, and we need the people to actually be in the seats to drive the vehicle. So kind of like a mixture of things happening. So if you don't have enough operators, you can't put enough service on the street to meet the demand. So I think there's been a situation where our contractor is successful in hiring bus operators, but once they get that CDL license and once they become proficient enough, then, I can go to WMATA. I can go to somewhere else and
Come on.
make more money. So like, then you got to retrain someone else again and it starts all over again. So I'm making an excuse, but it's just like the reality of trying to retain what we have. Then we only have one garage in Forestville that is almost at capacity. So, the more we add, it's like it adds pressure to the facility. So we're pretty much capped. So we can talk to WMATA, in another forum about, can we some of your bus garage space to store some vehicles so that we can actually provide more service in the county. So that's a whole nother conversation.
I'd be happy to run the service for you, Anthony.
That's
It's a little money.
I appreciate, Cheryl and Anthony kind of tag teaming to kind of share some of the hill that we have to climb in terms of like raising and dedicating additional resources in order to be able to expand local bus service operation in the county. But I actually think a really critical piece of getting to that much longer term goal is to be really demonstrating like who and what are the constituencies of people that would serve to benefit. So like one of my closing questions for folks, and if anybody else has any final questions, feel free to drop them in the queue or like raise a hand. Thanks, Doug. We'll get to you like right after this. Is that I wanted to make sure that one of our next bus events that we actually use it as a chance to really like highlight the experiences of essential workers and have a variety of different essential workers that use these routes, kind of like talk and speak to it in different ways. And so one of my questions kind of came from the chat a little bit. Jim, can somebody speak to kind of the nature of service in some of our immigrant clusters in the northern part of the county, both currently in the Langley Park area and in other places? Like, where does that service kind of exist? Where are there current gaps in that service? And also, as the Purple Line and other stuff comes, transitions that we're anticipating there. I think something that would be helpful for our group, in addition to like just that context, is what happens when we have a new reason for service, whether that's a new activity center, employment center, or a cluster of need, and how that route development process goes. Because I think that's something a lot of folks on our call would love to learn
Well, that's a lot of questions on statement.
about. I told you I might bring us to the end, but we're going to get
Yeah,
to
let me start by just saying that I think the northern county tends to have, because of the development styles, the nature of the roadway network, tends to have more of the higher frequency services with wide span 7 days a week than perhaps we've seen in the southern portion of the county. It's an older development area, but there was a comment about Langley Park. Langley Park is centered in the crosshairs of the New Hampshire Avenue services, which will be 12 minutes all day, every day. The University Boulevard service will be 12 minutes all day, every day. Just down from there is the F4, and there's the Green Line up there, in addition to having the R1 and 2 and the G12 and G14 and all the other services that are up there. So I think it's a really well evolved service that's been built over the years and has been adjusted regularly and frequently through collaborative studies with the county and engaging riders. We've made nearly 600 service restructurings and changes over the last decade. So Metrobus is very much committed to being dynamic and responsive as new development comes along, to the extent that we can work with the county to plan ahead for service changes. We're very successful in doing that. And a number of examples around the county and the region on that sort of thing. But I think, the immigrants, we do work as part of our outreach to make sure that all information is translated in Spanish. In fact, the internal announcements on the buses are Spanish. We also have, I believe it's 6 key languages that we use. Allison Davis, who's on, may correct me. And then we have more than 24, I believe, language interpretation services available. So if a customer needs information from us, we have a number of means to be able to support them.
Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate that. Doug, do you want to get to your question?
Okay. Name is Douglas Stallworth. I'm a retired transit planner from DDOT and from WMATA. And in my role at WMATA, I was a project manager for about 9 priority corridors, 2 in Prince George's County. So I wanted to comment on the 2 Prince George's County corridors. First one, the South County, was the P12 in the Silver Hill Road. And I want to commend Jim on that, because one of the recommendations in that study was to go from 20 to 15 minutes in frequency. And now going to 12 minutes is going to make a difference, because that's the one thing, that was the frequency and span. Those are the 2 things they were really interested in. And the other thing was because the court is such a long route that runs from Madison Road all the way to Eastover, we had the people complained about the segment from Southern Avenue to Eastover, where because the P12 has to run through a number of apartment complexes. And the recommendation for that quarter was to split it up at that southern end to a proposed P10 that would run from Eastover to Southern Avenue. And that was never implemented. So that's something I think you should want to look at that possibly, because that would help to speed the service along in that quarter. Now, in the northern end, in the Route 1 quarter, we had, once again, have to commend Jim on the T18 and I think the 83 and 86. Those going to that 12 minutes are going to make a big difference for them in terms of frequency of service when they talked of the need for that. The other big thing that they were interested in that quarter was limited stop service from the University of Maryland into the district. And at the time, Maryland, it was one of our options, but Maryland DOT refused to fund such a service. They didn't want to run service into the district. But the people, and we had a meeting, I think at the Busboy and Poets out in Hyattsville at the time, and we had a big crowd, and the people were really interested because they said there were a number of nodes along that corridor specifically. And from not only at the university itself, but the East-West Highway, at the Cafridge property, at the Whole Foods along there, and at the Arts District, and in Mount Rainier, all those things, with the development that was taking place, you could really encourage, boy, if you got a faster bus service in that quarter. And we ended up, implementing the G9 in the district portion of it because the Maryland didn't want to fund that other end. But I think that's one thing that should still be looked at, because you still have this large university, Big Ten university out there at the other end that you could really get that ridership at those nodes along there. I'll leave that as my major comments.
Thank you, Douglas, for offering some very on the ground perspective to close out our conversation here tonight. I think that was super duper helpful. And I think something for folks to keep in mind moving forward are two things. One is a response to something that I know Anthony and Jim asked for earlier, which is that in our follow-up, again, we're going to ask a specific question of each and every one of you, is that if you'd like to be a part of some of the rider advisory efforts, both for the county and regionally, if you could raise your hand and let us know, because we'd love to find a subgroup of our Rise Prince George's Coalition that are members that would like to work on our Better Bus Services campaign in a focused way, in the same way that we have some separate people that want to work on our placemaking efforts and other folks that we tag team with on affordable housing. So that's my first statement. And my second statement is just something for us to keep in mind as we start what I think is going to be a long process of achieving and realizing some of the changes and goals that we want. Which is to really understand that, one of our challenges here in Prince George's, especially as it relates to bus service, is resources and what those resources can be focused on effectively. And that at the moment, we have this real tension between intensity of service and coverage of service. And one of the things that I think our group is going to have to do some thinking about and conversations about, in the same way that we talk about placemaking and wanting to focus on a handful of parts of the county, Suitland or Capitol Heights or Langley Park, not only for economic opportunity reasons, but also equity and inclusion reasons, are some of the same driving principles and values we should keep in mind as we try to think about developing and communicating priorities to folks around how we can make better buses for the future. So with that, just want to say thank you on behalf of Cheryl and everyone else from the Coalition for Smarter Growth for coming out and joining us here tonight. And thank you to our panelists. Love to give a big round of applause to Anthony and John and Jim, and all of you for showing up and joining us for the conversation. I know some folks wanted to say something at the end. Feel free to jump in. I'm not the only one allowed to talk here. Thanks, guys.
Well, I think we need to wrap up now.
I just meant closing, if Rodney or Kian or other.
Oh,
folks-
yeah. So if Anthony, John, or Jim, if you have any last minute, I think we'll, and if other people have questions, they can email me or do the chat. Any closing words, Jim, John, or Anthony?
Sure, I'll be glad to go ahead and let Anthony finish up. I just want to thank you all for the chance to talk about Metrobus, one of my favorite topics. We have spent the last 20 years rebuilding the system, resources and assets. So right now, we have the best buses we've ever had. We have the best divisions and maintenance capabilities. We have the best technology. We've got terrific training. And we've got good customer facilities that are either present or in the process of being improved. So I think we've got a really great platform upon which to launch the future. And everyone's input is going to be needed in order to work our way through all of the choices. But I do want to leave you with three thoughts. Number one, in challenges facing us, the vehicle technology changes, the move towards zero emission vehicles, is a real challenge. It's something that's going to be difficult to do very quickly because the market, the logistics, the knowledge of staff to be able to take care of those vehicles, we really need to make investments in it. And partnerships with technical schools and other sources is really going to be crucial to being able to sustain these services. Number two, competition. We're beginning to see, especially if we're going to be at some lower level ridership, if there's too much competition within that corridor, it's really hard to justify retaining the service, even if we started it up, the federal money. And that's hopefully something the bus network study will take a look at. But the rise of Uber, Lyft, the TNCs, the scooters and bikes, and every other and telecommute is really fundamentally changing the nature of the transit network. So it may be a matter of having to use more of the demand responsive service scenarios like Anthony's testing in South County in order to provide the coverage and the span of services in hours when you really can't justify running a 40-foot bus. And lastly, one of the most crucial challenges we're going to have in the next decade is staffing. Having bus operators available to operate the buses is going to probably be the number one constraint that Metro faces in sustaining the network that we have and the network that people envision for us. I don't know what that solution is. It's been a challenge for the last decade, and but I think it's going to increasingly be a constraint we need as a community to figure out how to address that. But thank you all very much. Really appreciated the questions and the discussion.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll just make a couple quick points. Thank you so much, Cheryl and Bernard, for hosting this. Really appreciate the forum, and definitely happy to talk about what we're doing. Jim hit a couple points that I wanted to stress in terms of the bus operator availability. Definitely, if this group can find a way to reach out to workforce development groups with community colleges to either facilitate, people who want to get their CDL licenses, how we can kind of have a pipeline of people that can come through and work for us. That would be great. And then also the last thing is COVID-19 has upended a lot of stuff for us. But from the county's perspective, we are looking at it as a way to kind of retool how we operate. And we're definitely committed to operating differently prior to COVID. And we're seeing signs of that now as a result of some of the routes. So we're actually going to be looking at that in context of the Purple Line and making adjustments to some of the routes that serve the Langley Park area in Hyattsville. So we may be tweaking a few things in the coming year, but definitely we will keep engaged with this group and the future committee members about those proposals. Thank you once again.
I'll just close and say, things don't change until people start coming together and saying, this is the future we want, and then we can start planning for how to get there. And so I'm really excited to see this group coming together, and thank you for letting me speak with Jim and Anthony, who have far more experience and wisdom than I do. So.
Thanks, John. Even despite your youthful years, you contributed a lot to this panel, and really thrilled to have you and the Greater Washington Partnership and Metro Now working with all of us on all of these issues. I just wanted to see, is there anybody else from the coalition? Anybody else out there just that had a closing comment, closing word, closing anything? I know people raising hands. That's all. All right. Well, I hope from hearing from you next time. Thanks so much for coming out, everybody. We like ending
Thank you so
early.
much, everybody.
Nice that. Thank you.
All right,
You're
we'll follow
welcome.
up and share all these
Thanks
things.
for having us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks for offering your questions, man.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
All right. Good night.
All right.
Matt, it's good to see you, Douglas.
Yeah, I see you too, Jim. Cheryl.
You just missed
All
the meetings
right.
when you bring the cookies.
Oh, yeah.
Jen,
To
thanks
make
for your
that a
help.
prerequisite.
Okay.
Yeah, of
Thanks.
course.
All right, thanks, everybody. Oh, we're still
Thank you, Cheryl.
recording.